A police officer stopped a black man, belittling him for driving an expensive car and for the color of his skin. However, his shock was beyond words when it turned out that the suspect was none other than the director of the FBI. What unfolded next would astonish even the most seasoned observers. But let's start from the beginning. The morning had started peacefully. James Carter, a 50-year-old black man in a perfectly tailored gray suit, was confidently driving his black SUV down the highway. Soft music played from the speakers as he mentally rehearsed a speech he was set to deliver at the federal office later that day. James's upright posture radiated confidence, but the sudden flash of police lights in his rearview mirror caused his chest to tighten. He turned on his signal and carefully pulled over to the shoulder. Moments later, a young white police officer, Zach Thompson, approached his vehicle with a serious yet tense expression. At 30, Zach was accustomed to being in charge, especially in situations like this. Walking up to the window, he knocked firmly on the glass and gestured for it to be rolled down. "License and registration," he barked curtly, skipping any pleasantries. James calmly handed over the requested documents, keeping his emotions in check. "Whose car is this?" Zach asked, eyeing the interior with suspicion. "Looks a bit pricey for... well, you know." "It's my car, officer," James replied evenly. "Is there a reason I've been pulled over?" Instead of answering, Zach cited a violation that clearly hadn't occurred and launched into a series of provocative questions. James silently watched as the officer circled the vehicle, clearly searching for a pretext to escalate the situation. "Step out of the car, sir," Zach ordered, his hand resting on his holstered weapon. James complied slowly, stepping out with deliberate movements, noticing a couple of passers-by stopping to watch the scene unfold. One of them, a young woman holding a phone, began recording. Zach looked James up and down, his tone growing more condescending with each word. "Where are you heading, Mr. Carter?" Zach asked, glancing at the documents with a faint smirk. "To a business meeting?" James replied succinctly. "A business meeting, huh?" Zach scoffed. "And if I search your car right now, what am I going to find? Drugs? Weapons? Do you have a warrant?" James asked calmly, holding the officer's gaze. The question only seemed to agitate Zach further. Stepping closer, he invaded James's personal space and raised his voice. "Listen, you're asking a lot of questions. Either cooperate, or this could end badly." At that moment, Officer Sarah Rodriguez approached. A Latina woman around 35, Sarah took in the scene with a discerning eye, immediately sensing the tension. "Everything okay here, Zach?" she asked, glancing at James. "It's under control," Zach snapped. "We've got a suspicious individual here." "Suspicious?" James said evenly. "Because I'm black, wearing a suit, and driving a nice car?" James's words hung in the air. Sarah's eyes shifted to Zach, her expression questioning as she tried to assess the situation. Meanwhile, the small crowd on the shoulder grew, and the woman with the phone continued filming. Zach, determined to assert his authority, barked out another command. "Hands on the hood! Now!" Without protest, James complied, but his eyes met Sarah's as he moved. She hesitated, clearly starting to doubt the legitimacy of her partner's actions. The tension thickened with each passing moment, but no one yet realized that this encounter would lead to a revelation that would leave everyone stunned. James stood with his hands resting on the hood of his car as Zach began roughly searching his pockets. The crowd on the roadside continued to grow, with murmurs of discontent becoming louder. The woman with the phone kept recording, her voice faintly cutting through the noise. "This isn't right. He hasn't done anything." "Your behavior is suspicious," Zach declared loudly, pulling out James's wallet. "Let's see who you really are." He flipped through the wallet carelessly, stopping when he spotted a badge. His face momentarily froze. "What's that?" Sarah Rodriguez asked, noticing his expression as she stood nearby, trying to get a look. Nothing important, Zach snapped, shoving the ID into his pocket. Stay out of this, Rodriguez. Sarah frowned, clearly unsettled, but she didn't push back. Her attention, however, remained fixed on Zach's behavior. Zach moved back to James's car, opened the door, and began searching inside without hesitation, ignoring the increasingly vocal objections from the crowd. You don't have a warrant to search that car, a man in the crowd shouted. Shut it, Zach barked, glancing over his shoulder. James remained calm, standing by the hood and refusing to react to the provocations. His gaze turned to Sarah, whose unease was now evident. Officer Rodriguez, James said in a calm, firm tone, I'm sure you're aware that his actions are illegal. Sarah hesitated, then gave a slow nod. Zach, maybe that's enough. He's already cooperating. There's no need to... Rodriguez, I'm in charge here, Zach interrupted, his tone sharp. If you don't like it, you can file a report. At that moment, a young man in a button-down shirt and jeans stepped forward from the crowd, holding his phone confidently. I'm a journalist, the man announced. Your actions are being recorded. Zach spun around, his face red with anger. Get out of here, or I'll arrest you too. Sarah raised a hand to stop him. Zach, enough. This is going too far. But Zach ignored her, turning back to James. You think you're smarter than me? You think your fancy suit and expensive car give you the right to talk back? You're no better than me. James slowly raised his head, his expression unwavering as he met Zach's glare. If you're finished, James said evenly, I'd like to take my documents and leave. Sarah, now visibly concerned, quietly pulled out her phone and began dialing their supervisor. She knew the situation was spiraling out of control. Meanwhile, a woman in the crowd shouted, This is discrimination! We all see it! Zach, struggling to maintain his composure, stepped closer to James, his face red with anger. You think I can't detain you? I can do whatever I want because you're abusing your power. James interrupted quietly but firmly. Before Zach could respond, the sound of a siren cut through the tension. A patrol supervisor's car pulled up behind the scene. Sarah took a step back, relief washing over her as the situation took a new turn. The crowd buzzed with anticipation, phones raised high to capture what was about to unfold. A patrol supervisor's car came to a stop on the side of the road. Captain Michael Henderson, a stern-looking man in his 50s with graying hair, stepped out. His sharp eyes immediately took in the scene. The crowd, the phones, James standing by the hood, Sarah's anxious expression, and Zach's barely contained aggression. What's going on here? The captain asked, calmly but firmly. Suspect is exhibiting suspicious behavior, Zach said confidently, avoiding specifics. Does he have his documents? Henderson asked. Reluctantly, Zach handed over James's wallet. The captain opened it, examined the ID, and froze. A moment of silence passed before Henderson turned to Zach, his voice sharp. Take the cuffs off him. Now. Zach, now pale, hesitated before removing the cuffs from James's wrists. The crowd erupted into murmurs, sensing the shift in power. James straightened, retrieved his badge from the captain, and held it up for all to see. I am the director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, he announced, his voice steady as he stared directly at Zach. The crowd collectively gasped. Zach's face turned ashen, and Henderson looked both furious and deeply embarrassed. He opened his mouth to speak, but James raised a hand, cutting him off. I will personally oversee the investigation into your actions, James stated firmly. He then turned to Sarah, his tone softening. Thank you for trying to de-escalate the situation. With that, James got into his car and drove away, leaving behind a stunned crowd and a deeply shaken police department. The news of the incident involving the FBI director spread like wildfire across social media. Videos of Zach humiliating James racked up millions of views, and his name quickly became synonymous with abuse of power. Commenters demanded his immediate dismissal and an investigation into his conduct. At the police station, Captain Henderson summoned Zach into his office.
"Do you understand what you've done?"
the captain growled.
"You didn't just break protocol, you've disgraced this entire department."
Zach tried to defend himself.
"I was just doing my job." "Your job doesn't include discrimination,"
Henderson interrupted.
"You're suspended, effective immediately. An internal investigation starts today."
Meanwhile, James Carter held a press conference. Standing calmly in front of a wall of cameras, he spoke with quiet authority. "This isn't about me. This is about a system that allows incidents like this to happen. Our responsibility is to change it. I'm initiating a full review of law enforcement practices at every level." His words sparked widespread support, igniting conversations about police reform. Sarah Rodriguez, reflecting on her role, formally submitted a statement to assist in the investigation. Her testimony about Zach's behavior earned her respect from her colleagues, many of whom began voicing their own concerns about systemic issues in the department. A few weeks later, the investigation's findings were released. Zach was fired and barred from ever serving in law enforcement again. His actions were officially deemed discriminatory and unethical. Simultaneously, the department launched a sweeping initiative to train officers on ethics and community engagement. James, undeterred, continued his fight for reform. He met with community leaders, participated in public forums, and worked tirelessly to ensure the incident became a catalyst for change. In an interview, James reflected, "I hold no personal grudge against the officer, but I'm determined to ensure that no one else has to endure what I did. We must build a system that protects, not oppresses." The story concluded with James, surrounded by supporters, presenting a letter of commendation to Captain Henderson for his cooperation in the investigation. The moment symbolized hope, that change is possible when justice is pursued with determination.